Welcome to the Hunt Backcountry podcast. This is episode number 490. And as part of the Experience Project today, Steve and I are talking about our experience packrafting on our recent caribou hunt in Alaska. In the previous episode, we talked about our experience with the flights and how that went. And this is a similar conversation where we just recap our experiences, but this time with packrafting. It was relatively new for both of us to packraft. Steve and I both separately have been on the water in different ways, and you'll hear a little bit about that. But packrafting specifically is something we had very little experience with. We do have a prior conversation with Thor from Alpaca Packrafts, where we cover what is a packraft, how do you use one, how do you select one for your needs, and much more. So be sure to check out that podcast and other resources in the link of the show description of that episode. Again, this conversation specifically was what we learned on this caribou hunt, how the rafts handled in what ended up being very swift water, what it was like to load them with meat, gear, and the antlers, and those types of topics. As always, we appreciate you guys tuning in. If you haven't yet, be sure to hit subscribe or follow in your podcast app so that you receive future episodes automatically. And if you're enjoying the show, it would help us tremendously if you could leave a rating or review in whatever podcast app you're using. Hit pause and do that now if you can. Let's dive into this conversation about packrafting for hunts. So packrafting, completely brand new to me, Steve. I know quite new to you before this. And of course, we have the pre-hunt episode where we talked with Thor from Alpaca Rafts. So again, there's much more in that episode in terms of what to know about packrafts, how to get started, how to use them for hunting, etc. The purpose of this episode is just to do our initial follow-up on, hey, we went and did a packraft hunt. Here's how it went. Here's what we learned. And there'll be even more, because I know for you and I both, Steve, it's something we want to do more of, and you guys may even be using here very shortly on the moose hunt as well a bit.
Yeah, we've gotten adjusted the hunt plan for moose too. Like we are 100% using packrafts.
Was that a result of the experience on this caribou hunt, or I mean, because I know it was like maybe a tool for the moose hunt, and then now it's like oh yeah, we're doing this.
It actually started with I had for the beaver flight, we've got four of us going in, using a beaver to fly in there, and I had in my head 1,600 pounds as the weight capacity, and Boschma was like, I don't think that's right. And I double checked my notes and it was 1,200 pounds. So we just flat out don't have the capacity to take the bigger raft and motor as well as
Mhm.
the pack rafts. And honestly, kind of, I guess after using them on a caribou hunt and how awesome that was, I felt extremely confident that we'll just get dropped off on the lake and there's where we're going to be hunting. There's one creek that just runs for, I don't know, 10 to 12 miles up this big draw. And we basically can just hike as far as we want up into there, get to a spot that I feel is, that we all feel as a group is like, hey, this looks like we're seeing moose, or this looks like a great spot to set up a base camp and hunt from here. And then we're just going to hunt from that location. And once we kill all four moose, just float it out, one in each raft out to the lake. And it seems like a very slow, meandering stream where it wouldn't be, you could overload the crap out of that raft and be able to, you're probably going to be in knee deep to waist deep water just walking it out for the most part is what I'm kind of envisioning.
Hmm.
But that once I kind of just that plant to me, it seems like just a fantastic way to go. There's going to be very few hunters who are getting that, say we get 5 miles away from the lake. I can't imagine too many people are doing that. And I don't know what it's like to fly a Super Cub around in that country and where they can and can't land. So I have a feeling we're going to be accessing and hunting, even though it's only 5 miles away from the lake. It's, most people are not doing that with moose. You're, sticking within a mile of just because they're so logistically heavy to pack out.
I'm so excited for that hunt. I'm not going. I'm just excited to hear how it goes and talk to you guys.
Yeah. It was probably, well, I guess I knew what to expect with caribou. I have a
Uh-huh.
good feeling on mountain goat. Just, you've done the hunt, you've been there and I've seen
Yeah.
pictures and video. So the moose is the biggest one that I didn't have. It was just kind of up in the air. So I didn't really set like a high level of expectations. Just like, we'll just go with the flow and see what happens. So
Mhm.
it could be a hunt that you do once, like, I never want to do that again, or it could be freaking amazing. We'll see. Just trying
See,
to, I guess, keep a set a low bar, keep an open mind, and just take it as it comes.
it would have to be exceptionally terrible to be worse than your first moose hunting experience. So I think it's going to be better.
Yeah, yeah. The bar is very, very low when it comes to moose hunts.
All right. Well, that's a different conversation to come. Talking about pack rafts and our caribou hunt. Again, we have a fantastic podcast with Thor. So we're skipping a lot of background and context on pack rafting to lay the groundwork. I have next to zero experience with the pack raft in particular. We'll talk about my 30 minutes of experience in a second. And then just on the water, I've done whitewater rafting, and other types of floating and boating, but I am far from any sort of expert in any way on reading water, on being fully self-sufficient on water, etc. So the pack rafting aspect I was incredibly excited about, but also had that like healthy respect for I have no idea what I'm doing. So
Mhm.
hopefully this goes well. And then in July, when I was out in Idaho, you, myself, and Justin got out and just used the pack rafts for a little bit, I think between like 3.5, 4 miles. And so that was the extent of my pack rafting experience. And so uh, I wasn't nervous going into the caribou hunt. I just was, I think, again, like a healthy respect of I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know this water. You had been in the country. I'd never been in the country. I've never done anything close to 30 miles on a pack raft, much less with, loading it with an animal and what ended up being uh, high water conditions, etc. So anyway, that's just where I was at approaching this, but was incredibly excited about the adventure aspect of it. I mean, that goes back to it would be boring if I felt extremely comfortable doing this and very confident in my head. So I was trying to balance, don't be foolish, don't get in over your head, but at the same time, like stretching me outside of what I was comfortable with or had experience with. So I was really looking forward to it.
To be honest, that's like the one, if there was something I was disappointed in this trip, was that it was just a 5 hour window that we were in those rafts and it was done. Like
Yeah.
I wish, if nothing else, we had just stayed the night on the river on our way out and floated out the rest of the way the next morning or something, just to enjoy it and be camped kind of out in the middle of it all one more night. But they were absolutely fantastic. We're certainly like, okay, how can we go back and do another version of this hunt, or just hunt moose, or just hunt bears in this country or something in the future? Because that was incredible.
Yeah. So for you guys who didn't maybe hear like the hunt story or the hunt breakdown podcast, going into this hunt, we knew we had a big stretch of river and we had to get from point A to point B. And we knew we were hunting, but we didn't know how those were necessarily coinciding. Are we going to get dropped and float, you know, 0 miles, 5 miles, 10 miles, 15 miles and start hunting? Are we going to move often? Are we going to kill one caribou, come to the rafts, float to a new spot, kill another caribou? All that was up in the air based on what we were seeing, what we were sensing, what we were feeling. Um, and to skip ahead again for guys who didn't hear the recap, we ended up landing on the river, hanging the pack rafts, and backpacking, and then never touched the rafts until it was time to get all the way down river to get picked up at the end of the week. So all of our pack rafting came in one big chunk, and it all came with heavy rafts with 4 caribou killed. Um, so we'll get to that, I guess, to talk a little bit about some of the wasn't experience on the river, but just the experience with pack rafting and just the simple logistics of once we decided to leave the river, to leave the rafts, at least to start the hunt. We thought this was going to be for maybe a couple days, 3 days at the most. We just hung everything up in a tree, all the rafts, all the PFDs, paddles, all that gear, plus some extra food and other gear, and left that. So that was, our simple approach to kind of stashing all of that gear was to hang it. We did have some mothballs and other things also at that site. And then try not to go full into the story, but we essentially got separated from the rafts and ended up upstream from the rafts to then have this decision of, okay, now we're 4 to 5 miles up the river with caribou down with meat that needs to be packed. So ultimately made the decision at one point, Steve, we had to hike downriver to the rafts, collect everything, the rafts, the PFDs, more food, paddles, etc., and then hike upriver to where we had gotten some caribou off the mountain. So we essentially extended the float distance as well by going downriver and then hiking the packs or the pack rafts upriver. So we never
Hmm.
had to spend any time carrying the raft and significant amounts of gear, meaning full camp, or carry the raft and any sort of meat on the pack. Um, but if I had to guess, the pack rafts, when we made that trek and packed them upriver, we did have extra food, extra gear, other things. We're probably 50 to 60 pound loads with all that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I want to say there's, oh, I think you're probably close to 20 pounds. Because the alpaca rafts, I think the one I has the Forester, how it was configured, I want to say it was like 14-ish pounds. Then you got waders, paddle, life jacket, pump, repair kit. You had your Crocs that you needed for that. So it just kind of added up to, I think there's about 20 pounds
Waders, yeah, I don't know if you mentioned that.
of stuff it's all involved in floating. It's definitely more than just simply a raft and an oar, you know.
Hmm.
There's a few extra pounds there for sure, which was just felt like, but it's definitely packing for that trip. Like, God, I thought this was gonna be simple. There's a lot of crap here. I'm trying to load in these duffels. Uh, they were unbelievable once we got those things on the river.
Yeah, so we packed them up, and as you said, that was the first time I guess it really hit me of like we knew what we had going in, but it's one thing to fly into the field with this stuff or, hang this stuff in the tree, but when you did start to realize if you have to travel distances and pack this pack raft, there is quite a bit that goes with it. And some of that's small things, but even those small things, it's not only the physical space and weight, but just that mental energy of, as you said, Steve, it's okay. It's not just a raft and a paddle. It's, do I have my repair kit? Do I have my PFD? Do I have lashing for anything I need to tie to it, etc.? So I wouldn't, it's far from complicated, but it is a bit more involved when you start actually trying to put those things on a pack and what's involved with carrying them. So we did that. Um, I guess we'll touch on the river conditions a bit. Again, we told this story, but it plays into the experience, I think, of rafting and what we ended up launching the boats into, which is the river had risen multiple feet. It was very swift water when we first got to this location. And then over the time of hunting and then getting the pack rafts there and hunting some more, going back up to Kill My Bowl and packing more meat. When it came to the point of, well, now we have 4 caribou killed, we're tagged out, we have everything down at the river, and we have pack rafts, but now the river's rising. Um, it definitely did not appear to be wise to just to just jump in the raft and send it And so we just had to play that game of evaluating conditions, and that was seeing what the river was doing. Is it continuing to rise? Is it receding? And so we were just moving sticks and markers. And then also just a lot of time, looking ahead at maps and seeing what's downriver, what turns, what bends. We were seeing massive amounts of debris go down the river and full-size trees and everything else. So we know like that's either going somewhere or that's getting hung up and potentially could be a hazard. So uh yeah, there ended up being a lot of kind of continual discussion and back and forth among the four of us on just monitoring conditions and trying to make an informed decision. But that's hard to do when you're in a new spot on new water and have limited experience with these rafts.
Yeah. So that, what was it, Saturday night? We had the bear get into the meat, and ideally, if the bear hadn't gotten to the meat, we could have gotten the rafts and just started floating. But as the bear's gotten in the meat and we find it, we're getting it all cleaned back up and patching game bags together. We're certainly noticing the river's getting higher. And yeah, it definitely, this portion of it got more narrow, was moving a lot faster, definitely like dropping, more elevation faster than down where we got dropped off. And it was certainly more intimidating just looking at it. Like you said, when we first got the first load of meat out to that spot, you're looking at like, oh, that water's cruising. That's not just a leisurely paddle. Like there's 0 seconds of like, oh, I'm just going to enjoy this float. It's like you're reading the water, making adjustments continuously. And so the water's coming up and marking, like you said, marking it, just putting a stick in the ground where the water's meeting the bank, and then it's continuing to rise, and then wake up Sunday and it's just flat out, no, not an option. It had gone, 2 to 3 feet. I don't know if we ever got like a firm measurement on that, but significant. And then as trees are floating down the river, it's like all of a sudden, yeah, you said having Onyx too, just to step aside, like that is such an amazing tool. Having the good aerial imagery, that's something as a side note that I don't know if we talked about, but definitely I think whenever you've got an area that know you're going to hunt, download the highest resolution images possible. The having the ability to kind of zoom in and pick apart what is this brush or grass or trees or alders. And then same thing for the river. We were breaking down the entire float all the way out, just trying, okay, that could be a dangerous spot. I mean, we certainly had that first 4-ish miles mapped out, like in my mind. Okay, right turn, left turn, right turn, heavy right turn. Like, okay, I need to hug the bank here, and just reading it. And but so it was fantastic to have that aerial imagery. And then yeah, as you lost all gravel bars, and so if you got pushed to the side of the river, you were getting tied up into the bushes and trees that are overhanging, and that's certainly a very dangerous situation. So that's where it just Sunday wasn't, I mean, it was not even an option to like, oh yeah, we'll think about floating. It was just flat out, no, this is not safe. And yeah, we woke up Monday, the water was still high, but had dropped a little bit, and then by noon, it had dropped enough that we actually felt like it kind of hit a sweet spot where some of the rapids that were right out in front of camp had kind of leveled out. The water was just so high and moving so fast that they weren't as big of waves. And we decided that Justin and I would get a raft, get weighted up, get life jacket up, and then go hike upstream to do a test run, just run back down to camp because there was a pretty good rapid up there and some technical water. And it's like, well, let's do this with, Justin was going to be acting as the 200 pounds of caribou meat, but he had a paddle just in case it was like, oh crap, I need your help steering this boat or getting out of the river, getting to the edge of the river. But he just sat up in the front of the boat and I got in the back, and we got out into the middle of that current. And beside it being really, you definitely would not want to load the boat that way with 200 pounds kind of all the way up at the nose of it. But it really wasn't that bad. And that what's kind of gave me the confidence to say, hey guys, I think we got this. I think we can start floating. And that was, yes, noon, 1 o'clock. And then we're like, well, if we just start packing up now, I bet by 5 we'll be push off and going down the river. And so that's what we did. And first time any of us had loaded those up with meat or really gear or anything. Our little test run we did when you were out here for the golf tournament was we just threw some dog food bags in the side of it just to get some idea of the weight of having weight down in the tubes and what that's like. And but everything went in. Even I remember Jeff being very skeptical. Like, there's no way the hindquarters are getting in here, and they slipped right into the side tube on that Ranger raft. It wasn't an issue at all. I had the bigger Forester one, so it's definitely not an issue. We did not. I was worried about tying the meat in there uh, so that it wouldn't like slide forward and back in the tubes. And Jeff was kind of like, I don't think that's going to be an issue. I don't think it can go anywhere. And we didn't really have a good way to tie it off because we had our dry bags and they just have just a single kind of rubber webbing in there that's designed to have a buckle on it, but we didn't have something that worked with it. That was kind of oversight. But ended up just sliding the meat. I did one hind quarter down the left side, one down the right side, front shoulders, miscellaneous, neck meat, ribs, threw everything, try to equal weight on both sides of the tubes. And then I put my um, badass thing about having that little 16-inch barrel, like fold the stock up, unscrewed the suppressor, and the entire gun just fit easily inside my backpack. So I didn't have to worry about the gun having sharp edges on the raft. Everything was just in the pack. And then I threw the pack like underneath the zipper inside the back of the raft and we inflated them up. I do think we did have their packable pump, which just does that last little couple PSI to top it off. And that was pretty handy to have. I didn't even attempt to do it with my breath. I don't think you did. I don't think I saw anybody doing that.
That pump was, yeah, I wouldn't want to use it as like the inflation device, right? But for
Oh,
adding that
yeah.
extra
Yeah.
pressure, for sure, it's a great way to reach that PSI.
So yeah, that their little packable pump worked fantastic. And we got everything blown up and then took a while for them to, I think, temper, it's called, where you just set them in the cold water and splash the tubes with water because the air will kind of contract and you need to add more air to it. So made sure that they were good and inflated. And then we just had a plan. Frankly, I was in the lead, and then we had Justin, and then you, and then Jeff. We kind of, um, me, Justin, Jeff all have decent amount of experience rafting rivers, with you being the least, and so we put you third just to that you could watch me and Justin pick our lines, and then if something were to happen, Jeff would be behind you to help out. And I thought it was a good plan. We were definitely, I guess, as an overarching theme, like safety was the biggest. Like we were very strategic. Like we did the test run, we had mapped out the river because it's I guess I mean there's video footage of it. You'll see it's legit. Like it's not floating the Boise River in
Yeah.
summertime. Like there's some freaking rapids and some rollers and some tight turns and not knowing what debris was going to be hung up in the middle of the river. I mean, there was a lot of question marks. And what
Yeah.
I didn't like was there was no, oh, we get like a 800-yard warm up and then hit a rapid. It's like right out of camp, we kind of shot down this one channel and then it kicked you right into a good left turn. And it was like you were in it. And so basically, I remember saying to everybody, like, we're basically, it looks like there's no way we're definitely going through this first rapid. There's no way around it. You're not going to stop, and you're not going to paddle to the edge. But when we get around that corner, if there's a spot to pull over, I'll pull over. And one, just check on everybody how'd that go. And two, if it's like I poop my pants during it, then we're just like we're only going to float a mile and reset up camp. Like it is what it is. We're just going to be safe. But
Yeah.
really, the other day we got on the river and got around that first bend, and I was like, man, this is like really. I was just shocked at how stable and in control I was, and then everybody else reported the same thing. Luckily, there was a little bit of an eddy I paddled over to, and then there was probably the biggest rapid of the whole trip was right below us, a couple hundred yards. I walked the bank down a little bit to scout it out, and basically you kind of had to like cross over the rapid, get to the inside edge, and just stay out of the big water. Because if you got into that, I don't think the raft would have, yeah, not with the weight in it, would have made it through that thing.
Hmm.
But yeah, just we got through that, no problem. I remember getting through it and spun my boat around and looked back, and Justin's through it, and you're right in it, and I'm like, yeah, all right, Mark's got it, he's good, and that was a big sigh of relief. And then from there, well, I think just just yelled out a big old woohoo and like, here we
Yeah.
go. This is gonna be a fun ride because we've gotten through that what I thought was gonna be the most technical spot, like pre-scouting everything. And uh yeah, and then obviously the river just cruised. We did that entire thing by 11 p.m. that night. And just again, everybody unanimously they were blown away by the rafts. I'm already like concocting ways. How can I where can I take this? What kind of country can I hunt here in Idaho to use it? They were incredible.
It was fun. It didn't like I didn't allow I that's what I kept saying is I've been so looking forward to this aspect of the hunt and of the trip. I hope that it is not 100% tense the entire time, so I actually can enjoy it versus just feeling like you're just on, right? And like in the moment of make decisions, read the water, and not be able to like look back and feel the context and the setting in the mountains and all that. And thankfully, it was super enjoyable. I mean, definitely had to pay attention, especially in the first handful of miles and that first go, as you said, you had to be quite strategic. I ended up doing that little test float that you mentioned you and Justin had did after you
Oh,
guys
that's
did
right.
it. You and I, Steve, went back up to the same spot. You were my dead weight slash rescue. And then, so I did that little float stretch just to get a feel for it. And going into that, I was like, this could either build my confidence or wreck it, right? If it doesn't go well, then it's gonna be like, oh man. But yeah, no, it felt good to do it. And then, yeah, just to reiterate some of what you, same stuff you said, just loading the rafts was impressive. You know, when you started, the four of us set out we have four rafts, but then you start setting out all of the quarters, all of the meats, the ribs, the rifles, the packs, the extra gear. I mean, we're standing on this small section of gravel bar we had to load these rafts, and it's a big yard sale of stuff. But then by the time we took off, the only thing external on the rafts, not in the tube, was just the caribou antlers. And so it was impressive to look at how much we had and then how those tubes handled it. And you're able to load the raft internally. Um, and then, yeah, handling wise, they handled fantastic. I'd say that obviously not from an experience or comparison perspective, but just they're very confidence inspiring that when you have that weight loaded, balanced, and it's low and it's in the tubes, even through rough water, the rafts, yeah, they're just very confidence inspiring. They handled it fantastic. And that's probably with me making some mistakes. So um, I'm like you. I want to do more of it, get better at it,
Yeah.
almost look for excuses to plan hunts that use them for sure. Um, and then, yeah, later in the trip, it was just an absolute blast when you got into some wider, calmer water. I mean, it's still moving quick, but it was wide enough you could float a little bit or spin around and look at the setting. And yeah, it definitely was an amazing experience for sure. It was I don't think you saw this happen, Steve, and I don't think I've mentioned it to you, but at one point when we were further down the river, because of the water levels were high, this river, as we got lower and lower on it, was braiding. And when you look at the satellite imagery, you can see like, oh, there's one or two kind of like main channels, but then all these other little small braids. And with the water levels being high, a lot of what was braided was just contiguous water. And you don't necessarily see all these little um, gravel beds, in the river. Well, at one point, Jeff and I both kind of picked a line and got high sided on this gravel. And so my raft comes to a stop. I'm kind of playing the game of like trying to inch it along with me in it. But of course, it's heavy with all the meat and me and my gear. And so I have to get out. No big deal. Wearing the waders, wearing the Crocs, and I'm pushing the raft in 2 inches of water, 3 inches of water. And again, because the water was so fast, it wasn't clear enough to see through it well. Anyway, I'm stepping and pushing and finally get some momentum. And I went from pushing my boat and walking in 2 inches of water and then 6 inches of water to taking one step, and it must have been 4 to 6 feet deep. And
Oh,
I
jeez.
totally stepped in a hole, or this little gravel bar I was in, just totally ended and went from leaning over, pushing with all my might to push the boat to get it to move, to then the boat takes off, my feet are out from under me, and I'm floating in the water and like holding the boat, like two arms over the side of the boat, and then have to do the whole and kind of like pull up out of swift water, kick a leg over, and get back in my boat. And it like happened so fast. I think Jeff was the only one that saw it, and you were further away and didn't see it. But that was a funny little moment I won't forget.
I had no idea. That was interesting. The amount of silt in the water was, um, I've done a lot of rafting, and you can't read it. It made it so difficult to read because you can't see 1 inch under the water.
Yeah,
It was definitely challenging. Yeah. Yeah, up high, man. That was like when we're talking about water. I mean, the raft is fully in the trough of the wave, crashing into the break, like it's crashing into your face.
yeah,
It was fun, frankly. Like
it was fun.
there's a lot of nerves going that first couple miles, but once we got through all that, it was like this is fun.
It was going back to the quarters and everything fitting in the boat. And I know that we talked about this with Thor on just how like remember asking at one point Thor, you know, not that I want to abuse the boat, but do more people think that they need to baby them or that they're more fragile than they actually are? Because in my head, like
Mm.
you think inflatable and packable at the weight that they are, and it's like, man, you like, do you need to be nervous on every little bump you hit or rock you hit, or if you hit a stick that's in the water, etc.? And one, they were very confident inspired in that regard. But even when we loaded them, I remember one kind of like knuckle of my quarters like pushing out on the boat, and the boat looked like it had a 2 to 3 inch tumor. And I was like, man, that seems like a lot of pressure, and you're feeling it. But Jeff had something similar. I don't know about your guys' boats, but I think they are. I'm not saying abuse them by any means, but I think they're pretty dang tough. And it was cool to load them heavy and put them in fast water and have a few bumps, and they didn't seem like they even thought about skipping a beat.
No, not at all. I remember the amount of times you'd hit the gravel bars down lower and drag your boat across the stuff, and got them home and cleaned them up, and it was like they look brand new. Yeah, we're gonna be an alpaca spokesperson here because they did an incredible job.
They're super cool. Um, Talk through kit besides the rafts really quick. I don't want necessarily to geek out, but just run down. Okay, well, what did we wear? How did that work?
Yeah,
The little things
so
that go with that.
obviously just stocking foot waders, and then instead of packing like a wading shoe or something, we all just elected to do Crocs, which worked just fine. I should have my Crocs. I should, ideally you'd have your Crocs are a half size too big to get a little bit more room for that neoprene foot to get in there. Mine were a pretty tight squeeze. And then had, obviously you want a good, and that kind of especially fast moving water, you want a good belt on there to keep water from getting down into the waders, and then wore a rain jacket over the top of that because you would need that. You're just getting, even if it was nice outside. Well, I guess if you're okay with getting wet, but we were getting very wet. And then our friend Ben Reynolds had sent me a life jacket company that made some good life jackets. And frankly, I'm glad we had them. They're like whitewater, really nice quality white life jackets. And I'm glad we had them. They're confidence inspiring somewhat getting into that raft. And so had those on, and I just had everything cinched up good and tight, like zipper of the rain jacket all the way up, cuffs tight, just knowing that yes, when we put in, like if I end up in the water, at least I've, gotta have enough time to swim to shore before everything starts filling up. And yeah, so that's what I was wearing. And then we did have those the Amazon awesome gloves. What are those things called? Showa, can't
Showa, I
remember.
think.
Yeah, those are pretty fantastic. Waterproof gloves, kind of a um, nice
Gosh,
tacky grip to them,
Showa
and
2802 or 20, sorry, 282-02. I can leave a link. They were
there
good.
you go. They were great. Um, yeah,
There was another, I don't know that I would have thought as much about this if the conditions weren't what they were. But it was serious enough. Again, I wasn't scared, but it was serious enough that when we got in the boat and we were loading the boats and I'm realizing that I'm putting almost everything in the tubes, the thought becomes, what if one of us, and this is true for all of us, but certainly it's true of me, least experience, gets separated, has an issue, etc. So in the waders or in my rain jacket, but always on my body, that's going to be with me. I was very conscious to be like, okay, I have my inReach on me. I had even a little bit of food on me. I think I had my little capsule with like a fire starter on me. I didn't go crazy
Mm.
like I'm, going to war or anything, but it was, I don't know, like we don't know what's downstream. Um, and it extremely cold water and obviously getting wet, even if you're to shore fine, is the potential of getting hypothermic, especially if the other people float past and you're on your own for a little bit. So, um, yeah, it was just thinking through those things of, okay, do I have my inReach? Do I have, a little bit of food? Just those basic things. It was, I'm not the guy who was always playing the what if game, but this just felt like the situation demanded it.
Yeah, it absolutely called for it. I mean, we specifically said like nobody, when I do my fishing trip I do every year, it's easy to all of a sudden be a mile in front of another guy. Somebody stops to fish a hole or, somebody needs to pull over and take a pee, whatever. It just happens all the time. On here, it was like, no, we're all like, I'm purposely like constantly looking over my shoulder, making sure everybody's in sight. And then, everybody's like, stay far enough apart that we're not banging into each other going down the rapids, but also stay together as a group in case something happens.
I think it's a good summary. Then more to come, both I think from the moose hunt, we'll see how you guys use the rafts. And then, as we said, there's certainly other trips we want to do with the rafts. So this was just our experience from the caribou hunt and more to come. And whether it's this topic or anything else, if you guys have follow-up questions, if there's something we missed or didn't address, definitely feel free to send those in to podcast@exomountaingear.com by email, and we could always include those in a Monday Minute or some other future Q&A episode. And yeah, still a lot to come. I haven't seen any footage from this hunt, Steve, but I'm so excited to be able to relive it when we're finally able to share some video of all this.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm very optimistic it's going to turn out pretty fantastic. Just based off of I know the camera was running a lot and we had one hell of an adventure.
Well, there you have it, guys. Again, more to come on the Experience project. And there are more resources and links to check out, including our previous conversation with Thor from Alpaca Raft, some links to gear and other items we mentioned in this conversation. And you can find all that at the link in the show description for the Experience Project website. If you haven't yet hit subscribe or follow in your podcast app, be sure to do that so to receive future episodes automatically. And we'll talk to you soon.